Hi, everyone. My name is Roman Kalyan. I'm on the Microsoft 365 product marketing team, and I focus in on our insider risk management set of solutions. I'm joined here today by Talal Mir, our principal program manager on the engineering side, focused on insider risk management. Talal, thanks for being here.
Hey, everyone. Thanks, Roman.
Yeah, so today we're going to present three different videos. One, we're going to talk about an integrated approach to identifying insider risks. The second one, we're going to walk through setting up a policy in insider risk management. And the third one, we're going to talk about the different remediation workflows that we have integrated into the solution. So with that, let's get started. As we think about insider risk today, organizations, as I understand it, are using a multiple set of solutions to try to identify these risks.
Yeah, that's right. So let's talk about this a little bit, right? Kind of pulling back, there's really two big challenges when it comes to effective insider risk management that you have to be sort of cognizant of. One is there's a lot of diverse set of signals you want to be able to capture to have appropriate visibility so you can identify where the risks are. And the second big challenge is that this isn't just an exclusive SecOps type of a problem. You have to be able to collaborate across HR, legal, and the business, right?
Yeah.
So when we looked at this problem in the past, we definitely came across a very fractured approach to how, traditionally people are trying to tackle this, right? And you look at the fractured approach in the sense of how people are trying to gather these diverse set of signals. You're talking about either some big UEBA or security analytics platform or a SIM that they have. Yeah. And the challenge with that is you have to go through, rather costly engineering exercises to be able to pipe in different data feeds, normalize it, and to run the appropriate detectors on top of that with appropriate context so you can identify high fidelity alerts. That's an expensive thing altogether. Yeah. Or the other approach that they take is they try to get these endpoints and deploy these agents on these endpoints so you can capture what's going on closer to the user. Right? Yeah. This is typically done with UAM type solutions, user activity monitoring type solutions, yeah, or DLP type agents that you can deploy to look for at least data exfiltration type of activity, right?
Yeah.
So that's very costly, right? It's expensive to do, expensive to set up. Then the second problem that I talked about, where let's say you've gotten that, you've put everything together, you've got alerts firing. It's not a matter of just working within your security operations center, working with just the SecOps people that you have to be able to manage that risk. Why? Because you're talking about employees and contractors and business guests and vendors that you have in your organization with whom you're bound by regulatory requirements or employment law or cultural obligations or privacy rights that they had. So how you choose to engage often requires you to proactively engage the human resources department in your organization, the legal department in your organization, the compliance department, the privacy department. So how you make sure you build a solution that sort of, collects all these disparate sort of organizations together, these roles together, and provides the end-to-end workflows that you need is, again, something you don't traditionally see in the UAM solutions, the UEBA solutions, the SIM solutions, the DLP solutions, right?
Yeah.
So when we tried to tackle this, it was really about how do we make this thing happen end-to-end? How do we make it easy for people to get started to bring in these diverse set of signals? Mm. And at the same time, on the other end of it, how do we provide native collaboration capabilities so that you can effectively manage that risk with collaboration?
Yeah. And, and we've talked about this before. In addition to the signals, you mentioned to me that context is important as well, right? Yeah. Understanding, like, for example, it's not just I downloaded, 150 files from a SharePoint site. It was what kind of files were they, right? Do those files have sensitive information in them? Did they have labels on them? That provides us with additional insights and information that we can then use to create a much higher fidelity risk score.
That's right? Exactly right. That's exactly right. We learned this talking to our customers and our experiences in the space is that, unlike security where a malware is a piece of malware is a piece of malware, right? Doesn't matter what part of the world it might originate from, what vertical that you might be operating in. There's a signature you can develop for it. You can find it, contain it, eradicate it. The interesting thing about insider risk is that you can take a sequence of events that you identify that you might consider quote unquote risky, right? Somebody downloading a lot of files, copying that to USB. And then if you take that and you present it, let's say 10 different customers, 10 different organizations, you might get 8 different responses on how they want to handle it. Because the risk appetite might be different. The cultural sort of norms might be different. And we don't think there's a wrong or right. It really does depend on what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. So what's important for us when we develop the solution is that we wanted to provide as much of that context as possible. So to your example, Raman, if somebody downloads 100 files, we don't want to just present, here are the files that were downloaded with the file names. We want to try to get as much enrichment out of that as possible to help you make that timely and informed risk management decision. So things like what kind of sensitive labels might be on those documents that you might have applied, or what kind of sensitive information types might be in those documents that you applied, to sort of really build that full view of that activity and provide that to the customer so they can take that decision that they want to take.
Yeah, because I think one of the things you just mentioned around sequencing is important as well, because I know that the other thing I hear from customers is that, you know, sometimes they believe that they've tackled insider risk by deploying a data loss prevention tool. But we know that that's just one part of the puzzle, right? You only have one signal coming in, and it's all rules-based.
That's exactly right. So the way we look at it is, so the DLP is a very important piece of technology that should be in an arsenal of any effective information security strategy at an organization. But a DLP is really a transactional control. It's focused on data loss. That's what it does. Yeah. So it is an important piece of the puzzle where we can get signals from to see if some sort of data loss event took place, or if there's a prevention of a potential data loss event that took place. But when it comes to insider risk, you really have to frame the risk around the individual, not the transaction. Yeah. And an individual is composed, and the risk to the individual is composed of a whole suite of transactions, a sequence of transactions that might have took place. And you have to take into account things like predispositions that might have happened, right? So did this employee recently resign? Did this employee go through some sort of a poor sentiment that was identified, or this employee go through some sort of a poor HR indicator, which could indicate disgruntlement? You have to take those kinds of indicators. You have to look at what kind of content was accessed, what happened with that content, how that content moved. But furthermore, it's not just about confidentiality risks, right? You know, we've seen in the news insider risks related to sabotage and fraud and physical threats. So DLP is a very transactional, confidentiality-focused control. And insider risk has to be a much broader sort of holistic view into that risk of that user as it pertains to multidimensional risks across theft, sabotage, fraud, leak, so on and so forth. So as you said, it's one piece of the puzzle. It's not the entire puzzle.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And so as we think about, like, you know, insider risk management from Microsoft 365, you know, the principle, that the approach that we took was we wanted to have something that solution that was end-to-end, that had integration with not only the ability to quickly capture the signals without requiring any endpoint agents, but also had workflows associated with, you know, remediation that allowed you to bring in the relevant individuals from teams such as HR or legal within your organization. Because, you know, these are employees that you're dealing with. And not only that, but privacy was important as well.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Privacy is actually critical. I would say that privacy was actually a foundational pillar for us as we're developing this solution. It had to be baked in. And I'll give you a couple examples of where that was important, right? So one of the principles or one of the design decisions that we made very early on in this product is that we're going to build it on the principle of opting in, which means that the kinds of signal that this system is able to curate and use is completely at the control of our customers. Right now, we'll talk about that in a bit more detail later. So you get to define what you're comfortable with. There might be regulations you have to be concerned with, or just cultural considerations you have to take into account before you choose different signals that you're okay with. That's completely under your control. Another example I always like to give is the ability to anonymize. Right? Anonymization, as you're getting these curated set of signals coming in for different risk identifications on users, you're building out this sort of a risk posture, if you will. Mm-hmm. That requires you to identify individuals as employees and business guests, right? And what the system does by default is keep the names of those individuals completely anonymized. And that's done not just for privacy reasons, but another important reason is because bias control. Right? A lot of times, unlike, again, external adversaries where you might not know the individuals, here you're talking about fellow coworkers or colleagues or family members or friends that work in the organization just like you. So you want to make sure you suppress that bias control and make sure that that doesn't kind of creep in and sort of force your decision on either suppressing an alert that you shouldn't be suppressing or escalating without proper due diligence.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I think the other thing that, that we've heard from customers that they really appreciate is our ability to integrate with other Microsoft 365 solutions natively. So, for example, data loss prevention. So we leverage the data loss prevention alerts to activate certain insider risk management policies, right?
Yeah. So as a classic example, we talked about this earlier, right? So DLP is an amazing control for any effective information security program at an organization. But it is a transactional confidentiality compromise control is what it is. So the way we can leverage that is if there is a DLP alert that may fire, we can look at that, we can curate that in and use that as a potential starting point to see if a user is conducting some sort of risky activity related to larger data leak or some sort of a data theft that might be happening. But that's how we treat it. We look at it as a starting point, right? It's just a signal that comes in.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And then, of course, there's the enrichment piece, which we talked about earlier, which is so important, right? Give you that context, understanding whether there's a label on, a particular set of content that may be being downloaded, gives us much more visibility into the type of risk.
That's right. So if you have deployed Microsoft Information Protection, for example, and you're applying either manual labels or automated labels, we can actually surface that as well in the solution to say there were some documents that were either infiltrated or exfiltrated or obfuscated, or there's some staging that was happening because of those on those documents. We can tell you the label that was available on those documents as well.
Yeah. And one thing that's interesting, and this is sort of started to become more and more relevant as we think about like the remote work from home environment is sentiment analysis, right? So understanding not only the kind of content that might be downloaded, but what was somebody perhaps saying in Teams or other communication channels. So in the past, you might have somebody that may be disgruntled, and because now they're not happy, they're starting to do things that they shouldn't be.
Yeah, that's right. So, insider risk management is really a game of indicators, right? And the sort of the ultimate goal that you're trying to move towards is identify these indicators early enough so that you can somehow prevent these risks from taking place. And that requires you to getting into these indicators which may indicate an oncoming risk. And one of those most common ones is disgruntlement. So super excited about some of the things that we're doing in this space. So you look at one of the solutions that we have as part of the insider risk management pillar is communication compliance, which is really focused on getting into the depths of communication, doing sentiment analysis, and identifying risks like somebody being threatening or somebody being abusive, and using that as a potential indicator to identify sentiment and ultimately disgruntlement, which could be a leading indicator of somebody becoming an insider risk.
Awesome. And lastly, of course, the ability to have integrated workflows for collaboration in the case of legal, escalating to legal directly from within insider risk management, so that you have a case that gets set up for legal. And I think you've said this to me before, which is the hardest part of e-discovery is the discovery part.
That's exactly right. So look, when we talk to our customers, including customers that are either starting off with just insider risk management programs or the ones that have very mature programs, you hear one thing that's consistent, which is that overwhelming majority of the time, you're looking to give somebody a slap at the back of the wrist, or you're looking for an opportunity to educate somebody on what they should not be doing, right? So overwhelming majority of the time, you identify some sort of risky behavior, you remind somebody through some education awareness or policies that you can remind them of on what they should be doing. Unfortunately, there are those few cases where you need to escalate, right? And we're talking about escalate for law enforcement escalation or a litigation, perhaps. And in those cases, what you have to be able to do is to do e-discovery so you can put the evidence together. And like you said, we've talked about this many, many times. The hardest part about e-discovery is the discovery bit. So because we wanted to build this as an end-to-end solution, as the system is going through curating these signals and building the risk profiles, what it's able to do is discover the evidence, right? Discover those documents that are part of any kind of exfiltration that's happening. Bring that in. So if the user decides to, if the analyst or the investigator decides that this is the case that they need to get ready for litigation or law enforcement escalation, with a click of a button, all that evidence is passed over to our advanced e-discovery solution, where your legal department can continue and not start, but rather continue on top of the assets that have already been discovered and create their case.
Awesome. Thanks a lot. This gives us a great insight into, insider risk management and the end-to-end integrated approach that we use to provide organizations with a much more effective way to not only identify insider risk, but remediate them. In other videos that we have here, we're going to go deeper into the ability to set up a policy, as well as what are the different remediation actions that we have available to you. So one of the things that customers have told us is that getting started quickly in identifying risks is important, right? As we discussed in a previous video around the fractured approach, configuring multiple, scripts to ingest signals, deploying agents to gather those signals can not only be fairly challenging for organizations, but then once you got all that together, actually starting to identify risk can also be challenging and time consuming. So I'd love to kind of jump into how insider risk management from Microsoft 365 helps organizations quickly get started with different policies that we already have built in to the solution.
Yeah, let's do it. So as we've talked about in the past, Raman, ease of use and making it easier for our customers to quickly get started is a key sort of a driver for us when building the solution. So let me show you how that actually works, right? So what you see in front of you is the policy page for insider risk management. I see that I have a couple of policies already set up, but I'm going to show you what it takes to set up a new policy and how easy it is. So I click on create new policy, and I'm taken through the first page of a wizard where the first thing I do is define a name of a policy. So I'll call this, let's say, a data leak policy. I can provide a description. Down below, Raman, you see a bunch of policy templates. So this is where what we wanted to do is make it easier for people to try to focus in on the types of risks that they want to build policies around. One of the things that we learned from our own experience in talking to our customers is that it's a really difficult space when you try to boil the ocean. So you have to start to compartmentalize and sort of focus on specific areas and make it easier for people to start to focus on specific areas that you want.
Yeah, like data theft or data leakage, security policy violations, things like that, right?
That's exactly right. So you have confidentiality type issues like data theft and data leak, and sabotage issues like security policy violation.
Yeah. So and also here you've got this disgruntled employees. That's important as well.
That's exactly right. So we've talked about this where, insider risk is really a game of indicators. And what you're trying to do oftentimes is to find that leading indicator, which can identify somebody as being an imminent or upcoming risk to the organization. And one of the ways you do that is by looking at sentiment and identifying potential disgruntlement. So at Inspire this year, we announced an enhancement to our HR connector where you can, if you choose, provide these sort of HR performance indicators, like somebody being demoted, somebody being put on a performance improvement plan, or somebody getting a peer review, because research shows that those could be leading indicators of somebody being disgruntled. So if you have that set up, you're feeding that into the system, that can be used to start up a potential data leak orchestration to identify if that disgruntled employee is conducting something which could account for data leak in that organization. So let's actually choose that one. So data leak by disgruntled employee. We'll get started, click next. And the first thing I get to do is select the users. So again, privacy is a super important pillar for this solution. So we wanted to make sure that you are always in control of what's happening in the solution. So you can choose to select this one checkbox and have everybody in your organization who has an active account in Azure Active Directory and have them be in scope for a policy, or you can be selective and you can select specific users out of AAD that you want to bring in and start to do that policy scope for. I'll pick everybody in this case to keep it simple. Next thing is the content that you want to prioritize. So we know not all content is the same. So this is a place where you can come in and let's say you're defining a policy for your engineering organization or your research and development organization. And there's an organization might be working on some super secret project in your organization. And those projects files have specific labels on it, for example, have specific information types, or maybe they reside on a very specific set of SharePoint sites. So now you can define what those are and say, if I see content have these types of labels or this information type or have these come from these SharePoint sites, I want to automatically treat those as higher priority. So what the system does behind the scenes is uses that to score that activity higher than activity that might not be coming from those locations or have those attributes.
Got it.
So I'll leave this thing alone for now and treat everything as equal. The next piece is a set of indicators. So we talked about this in the past as well, how difficult it could be to just get the visibility into your environment, right? So just as a quick recap, you're either talking about, setting up these complicated feeds to bring in data from your cloud services into some sort of a central UEBA or security analytics platform or a SIM, or you're having to deploy these agents on the endpoint that collect a bunch of signals on users and then pipe those in for some sort of orchestration, some sort of analytics. Here, it's literally a check of a box. That's all you have to do. The fact that this solution sits on top of Microsoft 365, selecting whether you want to see activity from SharePoint or Teams or download activity, sharing activity, whatnot, it's simply a check of a box. That's all it is. Furthermore, when you're talking about Windows 10 devices, Raman, there's absolutely zero agents you have to deploy and manage because it's built into the actual product itself. When you have Windows 10 devices, as long as you as an organization is managing those devices, literally just go here, select the signals that you want, and we will pull that in from those devices that you have enrolled. Again,
That's
I can't stress
value,
it.
man.
It's huge value that we've heard about over and over from our customers. Because again, there's no management overhead. There's no agents to deploy or manage.
Now, one of the things I heard is that from customers is that, hey, my environment is unique. It's not the same as, company A or company B. I think we just introduced customization as well, right?
That's exactly right. So context is important. Being able to configure your detections that are in line with the risk posture and the risk appetite that you have as an organization was a key feedback that we heard from our customers. So one of the things that we announced at Inspire just 2 months back is the ability to customize the thresholds. So you can continue to use the thresholds that we recommend out of the box, or if you choose, you can turn that toggle off, and now you can completely customize to your heart's content what you consider low impact risk score, medium impact risk score, or high impact risk score based on different thresholds that you can meet. Completely configurable for each and every single indicator on the list that you select.
Wow. Nice.
So I'll leave this as default just for simplicity's sake. Another thing I want to quickly touch on before I move on are these physical access indicators that we're announcing at Ignite. Super excited about this. So we've talked about how, for an effective insider risk solution, you want to be able to get a full 360-degree view of the risk. And that requires you to sort of transcend beyond the digital world into the physical world as well. So we're excited to announce a connector that we're shipping that allows you to bring signals in from your physical badging system so you can start to identify the physical movement of the individual as well. Super excited about this. So I'll select that here as well, assuming I've already set up the physical badging connector, and click next. These are timeframes that you can set. Mm-hmm. This is another thing that we've heard from our customers as a key differentiator for us. So unlike traditional insider risk solutions where you have to have a little bit of bake time, you have to deploy these agents, or you have to be able to bring in the data, start to set up your data feeds, and then start to bring in the data. And it could take days and weeks and months for you to gather enough data so you can run, for example, those anomaly detection models. For us, the fact that we're sitting on top of Microsoft 365 and all the data that's in your tenant, if you give us the permission on day one, we can go in and look at historical activity as well, as much as 6 months in the past. And start to orchestrate on that on day one.
And that's coming from the audit logs, right?
That's exactly right. So this is in your tenant. This is your audit activity. Everything gets fed into that. It's a common backbone. It's a consistent backbone of your entire tenant. We can go into and fetch that data and start to orchestrate on top of it.
Yeah, and we know from research like from Carnegie Mellon and Threat Institute that historical context is really important, because one of the leading indicators for insider risks is predisposition. People that have previously violated policy or doing something in the past that might be suspicious and now is leading to even more malicious type of behavior.
That's exactly right. So whether you have a predisposition to violating policies in the past could increase your risk score going in the future, and we could look that up with your permission. Or just the ability to understand, quote unquote, what normal behavior is for an individual requires you to look at their historical activity so you can baseline and start to build these statistical models so you can define what anomalous activity today looked like. So all that is available because we can look at historical logs. That's really it. You review your policies, all the settings that you've done, click submit, and you're ready to go.
All right. Hey, Talat, thank you so much for walking us through the policy creation. That was quick and easy, man.
Yeah, thank you.
So in the next video, we will go deeper into investigating a particular alert and look at the different case management and remediation actions that we have. All right, Talat, so we walked through setting up policy. That was awesome. As we talked about in the first video around the fractured landscape, being able to quickly set up a policy without deploying agents to capture signals is hugely important. We also talked about the ability to, having context and investigating different issues of using collaborating across your organization is important as well.
Yeah, so let's drill right into those things. So here I have a case that I'm looking at, and this view we've had since the GA back in February, where we provide this sort of macro view of that user. So in this case, you can see like going back on the user multiple months, different types of activity around data exfiltration, email information, so on and so forth. And of course, the context is all there. So I can see a bunch of files being downloaded from SharePoint. I can see if any of that information had sensitive information types like credit cards or labels like confidential labels. I can scroll down and get a chronological view as well. But one of the things we're really excited about announcing at Ignite here is also this micro exploration that we can give you. So not only is that macro exploration still available, but now you can actually dig in and get specific logs, one line at a time, on what the user was up to related to the different events, whether it's data exfiltration, infiltration. You can slice and dice this. You can look at different types of events. You can, of course, dig into specific events as well. We'll give you all the details that are available. So super excited about being able to complement our macro exploration that can span months into micro exploration, which literally spans seconds or sequence of seconds. Another thing we've talked about in the past is the ability to collaborate. So as you recall, we always had the ability to bring in different collaborators and contributors into this solution so they can look at the case and contribute to the case and create case notes.
Yeah.
But now we're excited about the ability to also spin up teams. So not only will you have the ability to set this as a default, so every time you create a case, you will have a team that's created for you where you can collaborate with all the collaborators that are there. Mm-hmm. But in case you go back to an older case, you can also go into that case and spin up a team that could be bound to that specific case, so you can go collaborate and have a workspace for, managing your documents, managing your notes, creating secure communication channels so you can communicate with your collaborators across legal and HR and so on and so forth.
Oh, that's really awesome.
Another thing that we're introducing now is the Integration Power Platform. Very excited about this. So as we've talked about in the past, this ability to run these workflows that require you to maybe notify specific users on certain actions, or check with the business or check with the manager on whether or not the observed activity is in line with expected duties or not. Those are workflows. And oftentimes you find these organizations having to manually run those workflows over and over. Right? They have to go in and go into your Outlook, send an email, summarize what's happening, get the response back, track the response, all that stuff. Well, now you can literally create these flows, and right out of the tool, you can send information and track these workflows and see how they're progressing and helping you actually move that investigation along. Super excited about this.
Yeah, it's a lot of efficiency there in terms of automation, right, for the different tasks that you have.
That's exactly it. This is all about driving efficiency, because we've talked about this in the past. Context is key for insider risk. And sometimes you need that extra bit of investigation, extra bit of support and collaboration to get the full context. So having the automation available right out of the solution is a super, super important driver for investigation. Another thing we've announced Inspire just 2 months ago is the ability to integrate with ServiceNow, for example. So if you're using a source solution for ticketing or just case management or what have you, you can actually, with one click of the button, have the information available in ServiceNow as a ticket, so you can track it there as well. Yeah. Another thing that we introduced back at Inspire is this ability to export the alerts for SIMs like Sentinel, for example. So if you have that setting set up, all the alerts that fire, they automatically get fed into the Office Management APIs. And from there, you can pick it up and bring it into any SIM of your choice, including Sentinel.
Yeah, so then the Office 365 Activity Management API is where the alert gets shared, and then you can pick it up into whatever you have, right?
That's exactly right. You can write your own connector to that and bring it to wherever you want, normalize it, and do whatever you need to do with that data. Awesome. Another thing that we've always had is, I've talked about this in the past, is the ability to escalate, to investigate. We've had this as GA, something that's getting very strong feedback from our customers, because this, again, sort of exhibits or at least outlines our commitment to providing an end-to-end solution. So not only are we helping you to identify the risks and actually investigate them, but we also give you a venue to escalate those to advance e-discovery in case of a litigation or law enforcement escalation right out of the box.
Awesome. Hey man, this has been awesome. It looks like, we already had the ability to escalate to investigation, the ability to send an email notice, the ability to bring in collaborators into a case. And now we have further enriched all of those capabilities with, not only automation, but creating a secure team site associated with the case, giving organizations much more flexibility in terms of how they remediate the different cases, collaborating across the organization.
That's right.
Talal, I really appreciate you being here and presenting and demoing for us today.
Great. Thank you, Roman.
And to learn more about insider risk management, you can visit our blog where we announced new capabilities for Ignite. It's at aka.ms/insider risk blog. Or you can go to docs.microsoft.com and search on insider risk management. We've got a ton of documentation there. as well as you can get started today within your tenant just by navigating to compliance.microsoft.com and enabling insider risk management and setting up a policy. Thank you.